Welcome to Salcedo Paranormal. It is Friday, March 25th, 2022, and today we will be talking again about mountains and the paranormal. This will be the last part in this series on this topic. Of course, to find all the episodes and links to social media, ways to donate, and other ways to contact me, you can visit the podcast page, which is Salcedo Paranormal at podbean.com. That's SALSIDO Paranormal at podbean.com. Always happy to hear from you all, whether you have comments or questions or topic suggestions or episodes, or if you have stories of experiences with the paranormal, whether they're your own or others that you trust. I'm happy to either read those on the show, or if you'd like to join me on the show, we can arrange that as well. Couple of quick announcements before we get to the main show here. First of all, I just want to thank everyone who has supported this podcast and helped us reach and just barely pass over 2,000 downloads of this podcast since it began about a year and a half ago now. It's really amazing to see that the community growing and get to know so many great people and be here with you all when you're contributing during the shows in the text chat. I do want to start having more call-in shows, but again, I want to wait and make sure that the technical support is there for that. But I'm hoping to do that again at some point. So just thank you all for being here and for listening, whether you're listening on the live stream, which I always recommend because you never know when the live stream will happen, but for whatever reason, the recording will not happen. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, starting on Monday, I'm going to be doing a paranormal news show. Just featuring anywhere from 3 to 5 stories that from the web about just anything paranormal, unexplained, supernatural, just whatever shows up that week. And looking forward to doing that. Maybe we'll even incorporate the call-ins to that show. We'll see. And then, of course, Tuesdays, I'm going to do because of changing the schedule a little bit, Tuesdays will just be true paranormal stories from the web, and that will include all things paranormal, including ghost stories, whatever ghosts may be, but basically including all stories of experiences of the paranormal. So that way, we don't lose that. We still have that every week, but I think it'll be interesting to talk about these stories, these articles that we find online. Also, happy to, if you all find any stories that you'd like to see covered, I'd like to hear my thoughts on. You're welcome to send them to me, either through Discord or, again, through any of the ways you can contact me through the podcast page. And if I think I can cover it, I will. I try to keep this a fairly family-friendly show, so, and also just who knows how many stories we're going to get, so please don't be offended if we don't get to a story in time. I have no idea how this is going to go, but I think it'll be fun. And so yeah, I was going to do it once a month, but just with all the stories out there, and I've had friends volunteer to help with finding stories, which I really appreciate. So that's basically the plan for starting on Monday. Mondays are going to be a news show, and we'll cover 3 to 5 stories, and maybe after I get used to that, maybe that's when we'll start incorporating call-ins. So, but I believe that covers everything for now. Again, like I said, today we're going to be finishing off our series on mountains and the paranormal. And of course, I'm very happy that to have a returning guest. Um, and so, welcome to the show, Jennifer. Thank you for being here.
Hello, James. How are you?
Good, good. Really excited about this topic, and then just the way the show is kind of changing. It's really been fun going through all that. So, yeah, just a really amazing day here, just considering everything. So, and I'm really happy to have you here today, and all these weeks that you've been here to help me with these topics.
Yeah. Well, and hello to everybody tuning in, and congratulations on your passing 2,000 downloads.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Just for I'm reading the chat here. Yeah. On Wednesday, we had both of the bots go down. That was quite the night again of strange synchronicities going on all night into the next morning, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, so I just have a couple of articles today. I figured I can kind of talk about them, summarize some of the encounters or the stories within these articles, and we can just talk about each one after.
All
So
right. That sounds good.
yeah,
All right.
I I will include these articles after the show. I forgot to put them in the chat, but since we only have two, I can include them this time. But this first one I thought we'd check out is caves and mountains connected to UFO and alien activity. Um,
That sounds
yeah, so the first story they mention here is the hidden people of, and I don't know how to say this name, but this is in Iceland. Iceland. Um, but I'll spell it here for you all. It's SNAEFELLSJOKULL. So, um, this year, the hidden people have apparently been around in folklore in Iceland for centuries. Of course, long before the um, UFO topic became popular, and a lot of people have had this idea. A lot of researchers have put out this idea that the legends may have been based on ancient alien sightings in the past. And then Iceland, and this area in Iceland, it's basically a glacier. Uh, they're considered important UFO hotspots. So that says here in this article, um, descriptions of these hidden people, uh, say that they're humanoid, but with an elf-like appearance, and so some UFO enthusiasts have tried to, or have suggested that these are also gray aliens. It's interesting the parallels that you find when you're looking into the stuff between elves and or fairies in some cases, and then gray aliens or just aliens. Um, and basically, there's this idea that the mountains that they call home are some kind of an alien uh, base. And let's see here.
yeah.
I think that's basically. Yeah, that's basically. Oh, wait, there's a little more actually. Um, Basically, the people there in Iceland respect these beings by basically leaving offerings of food and other gifts around the base of the mountains. Um, that's interesting. Some construction projects have been altered as to avoid basically building on land where these hidden people are said to live. So that's it for that one. If you want to, share your take on that.
Yeah. It seems like you hear a lot about, and I think it has to do with the fact that, I was thinking on this one, and in all these cases actually, and when you think about the mountains, it's like it's a piece of nature that kind of like deserts or any other remote spot where mankind really can't get a good foothold with their with civilization. And so I think that it's possible that a lot of the ancient races, or even perhaps alien life of some kind, but in this instance, perhaps the ancient races that used to kind of intermingle more with humankind. And I think that it's possible that they pick these mountains and these different um, cave systems. And perhaps at one point they had ventured into the caves to escape some kind of hostility or a natural disaster of some kind, but were more acclimated to it than people were, or there was some kind of division that happened at some point where they stayed in the mountains, whereas people at that time might have went ahead and ventured back into creating civilizations, but they were more akin to staying with nature and more in tune with it. And so it's possible that they stayed hidden away and undisturbed and remain there to this day. And I think if you were wanting to come in, for example, from another dimension or through some kind of portal system, that'd be a good place to come up and be undisturbed and able to act out whatever sort of, whatever kind of business they have, or if they live alongside and that's their own natural habitat, that they would be in those kind of locations. I think you would encounter them more likely in mountainous regions and in the more secluded, um, hard to get to areas. It makes sense, you know,
Yeah.
that they may find a place. Yeah,
Oops, let me see. What
that
if?
it could be something like that.
Yeah. It's interesting too in the chat here. Apoc says, "I bet they're inner Earth beings," and that does seem to pop up a lot, um, as well. And then Apoc also says, "Greys are also like the ant people from Native American lore, American Indian lore." Um, and then caves can also be a great place for portals, kind of like what you said, Jennifer. More stable frequencies, and yeah, so that's yeah, it all seems to come back to, and that's kind of funny too. You have this these opposites of these mountain tops, and then you have these caves that go under the mountains that you know we hear about these underground beings too.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a, if you think about volcanic activity, it makes sense that lava tunneling and that kind of, because there's huge lava caverns, tunneling systems underneath a lot of these mountains that have now become sleeping volcanoes or dormant or are dead volcanoes. But that tunneling, the natural tunneling due to the lava too, could create natural of sorts. But I think too, it's a very kind of like Puck mentioned. that they have a very strong, different magnetic field in mountainous regions due to the the weather being much different in those environments due to the high altitude and the propensity for being struck by lightning and being affected by barometric pressure, gravity is different on the tops of these higher altitudes when you start getting into, for example, the mountain ranges in the Far East and Iran. Those mountains are so extremely, have such an extremely high altitude that you're dealing with a completely different atmosphere almost. And the weather affects, it affects everything about how the minerals in the mountain are reacting to the environment. And it would create a very charged electromagnetic field in the magnetic field of the Earth in those regions. I think due to the amount of activity with the weather in the upper atmospheres, with the lightning.
Yeah, that's
And the lightning could be a catalyst in a way.
right. And that's something we're going to get to in a couple weeks here, is this idea of weather and ties to the paranormal, whether it's the paranormal affecting the weather or the weather making it easier for paranormal to manifest. I think there's a lot there. That's going to be fun to look into.
Oh, I think it will. People are, I mean, it's a different topic for sure, but you've talked a lot about the missing 411, and there is a kind of a tie-in to the weather having an effect on that. The storms come in when the people do go missing a lot of times, and it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Okay, well, we can move on to this another one of these locations. This one is, and this is kind of funny. This is called the Upside Down Mountain in Bugarach, Bugarach, France. It's in France. So this one is basically a mountain that overlooks a small town. It's known as the Upside Down Mountain due to the fact that the upper layers of the mountain are older by millions of years than the layers below them, which is really interesting. Theories suggest an explosion of some kind in the distant past basically brought up older material and then it landed on top of the newer material, I guess. And so that's how that happened. That is what they think. Many UFO enthusiasts and ancient astronaut theorists think that the explosion, or they agree with this explosion theory, but they say it was intentional rather than a natural occurrence, and point to the flat top of the mountain as proof that it was basically a landing pad for ancient alien craft. And the mountain also was the focus of researchers and UFO researchers, and also doomsday people that believed in kind of cataclysms leading up to the December 21st, 2012 idea, when the world was believed by some to be about to end at that point. Many people even went as far as buying land in the area around the mountain so that they could be there in case anything happened, that's pretty amazing. And it says, of course, it didn't, but there are still sightings of UFOs and strange lights in the area, and of course rumors of alien bases within the mountain's cave systems. And yeah, so that's an interesting idea of this mountain that's upside down, basically.
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting too when you think about, there's a lot of stories about, it mentions alien craft landing on the top of the mountain. Now, when you think about how the mountains reach up into the heavens, up into, and sometimes up into the clouds, and the way it would look to the people, but you hear accounts of like Mount Hermon, where the angels descended down onto Mount Hermon, the fallen angels. You have accounts of, like, in the Hebrew mythologies and things, of Moses going up to the mountain. There's always reference to going up to these very high elevations to get closer to God or to the spirits that might be dwelling there or might descend there or live there. And I think there's something maybe with that alien landing pad to do with that. It makes sense that that it would be a melding between the worlds, or that it might be seen that way as an in-between parallel between the higher realms and the realms of mankind, and how the ascension up to the top of the mountain would bring you closer to those beings, and that they may be dwelling there or landing there. So I think that makes sense. And you also think about the upturning of the earth flipping over, like the flipped over mountain idea, exposing what was hidden deep and ancient in the earth. You're talking like possibly, I mean, if time can be the way that we think of it, with the way that the earth, like the tertiary and the way that the geologists explain the mineral formation of mountains, if it was truly flipped over due to an explosion, then you would have a very ancient, uh, something that was once the surface of the earth in a long ago history suddenly upturned out of the landscape that belongs to an entirely different time period. Even in the ancient timescape of the earth itself, that one spot they believe is being flipped over and exposing a even more ancient part of the earth, and everything that would come with it as well. The magnetism itself of the magnetic field of the earth, when it's like with the lightning thing and the weather thing, when lightning strikes, it kind of creates a freezing in the magnetic field of the earth at that one instant. For a while, it's how geologists read the age of the rocks in the area, because where that lightning has hit, it kind of freezes the magnetic field at that one moment. So the storms in that time period, we're talking maybe, hundreds of thousands of years, or if not million, I guess, in that kind of timescape. So they would believe that that mountain, if it's flipped over, I think that they're saying that it's somehow incredibly even more ancient than the landscape that's around it somehow. And that there obviously is something special if it was a landing pad at one time, perhaps in their belief system, because in a lot of these cultures, they were even worshiping the mountains themselves, believing they were inhabited with a spirit, the spirit of the mountain, or with multiple spirits, accounts of that. So I think that maybe, with references to it being an alien landing pad, I think that's very interesting. The correlation between relating it to alien life, the same thing with the Holden folk, the hidden folk, being related to the great aliens, and how much similar they sound to like accounts of fae folk and the elemental world. So there's a lot of parallel there.
Yeah, yeah. Yep. That's Let's see here. Yeah, I'm just checking on the chat here, but yeah, it's funny. I think we have our first sighting of the ancient aliens meme here in the chat. That's another milestone, I guess, in a way. But yeah, no, I think that you're right about that. That part of the Earth from even further back than the rest of the ground surrounding it, that would make changes to, like you said, the energy, and then the lightning. I didn't know that about the lightning kind of freezing, or basically giving like a snapshot of the area, the magnetic field in the area. That's pretty amazing. Also, and here in the chat, Matt Sala says that Anunnaki used the mountains as landmarks to navigate their craft to the hangars. Interesting.
That is interesting.
So, okay, well, we can go on to the next one here. I'm kind of skipping over when you all might want to look at these articles because there's places in the U.S. that are mentioned in these articles, but since we did that for the last 2 weeks, I'm kind of skipping over those this time. But yeah, I would definitely recommend checking these articles out because they do have pictures about the areas and that kind of thing. So now this next one is something I can actually say. Now this is kind of mountain related, but it's this alien ship in the cave systems of Antarctica. The poles really are always interesting to me. I never want to go there, but the Arctic Circle and the Antarctic Circle, they're really interesting. It says the Antarctic is full of stories of aliens beneath the ice, UFO sightings, and all kinds of other conspiracies. But it says in January of 2017, UFO enthusiasts say they spotted an alien ship near one of the ancient cave systems. And it said that half of what appears to be a flying saucer can be seen sticking out of from a cave mouth. And apparently this hit social media, claims went around the web as people started looking into this more in pictures and everything. Some wondered if the craft had crash landed into the ice, while others thought that maybe the saucer was the remains of top secret Nazi UFO technology. And the sighting also came off of other claims, including those of pyramid-like structures spotted in a similar way using Google Earth. And then, so it's kind of connecting all these different these ideas. There's also been claims of secret entrances that people discovered to some kind of base or entrance to the inner Earth that conspiracies say exist there. So, what do you think of the Antarctic, Jen?
Well, personally, I think that I think there's a lot of secrets there, obviously. I think that we don't know. I think what they're telling us about I just feel like there's not enough information about it. I think because so few people are allowed to go there, you can only go there if you have permission, basically. The fact that the entire world has put a flag there, in a way, but it's uninhabitable almost. It's like a different planet altogether. But there are so many stories coming out of that region that it's a gateway basically to another world, that people have seen it in the past, and that we know below the ice shelf itself there are massive warm lakes, there are cave systems that do go underneath. It leads people to speculate that perhaps there is a secret there. I would speculate that if there was a different, I don't want to say hollow earth or anything like that, but if there was some kind of shift that happened on the Earth plane at the location of Antarctica or even up in the North Pole region in the Arctic, that there was more going on there than we're being told about. You can't just go to any of these locations. People have explored it. When they have explored it, they have found unusual things. There have been artifacts found. We've heard the accounts of the Nazis wanting to go down there and to even form a base there. As far as the mountainous region, I mean, the terrain itself is so treacherous but there's talk that even beyond that treacherous landscape, that impassable landscape, it comes to an opening. There have been lots of talks about life, maybe even it being a circle around somehow a more tropical atmosphere. How that would be would have to change the entire perspective of the earth we live on. So if there is a secret there of some kind, whether it's some type of hiding of a race of creature or species, or if it's some sort of a civilization that has taken habitation in that location in the Antarctic region, the mystery of not knowing, even, but I think for some reason, this weird unacceptance that there is nothing there besides just snow and ice. The mind I just don't want to accept that. It seems like there's been so many stories and accounts of there being more to it. And I think we just can't let that go. And then the accounts of UFO activity being, as it's described, it makes you think that it's some kind of portal to, or that there's something going on there that makes it special. But it might just be the fact that it's such a mystery to the rest of us and that people aren't just allowed to gallivant around. Although people have been right up to the ice walls of Antarctica, you can do it, you can go look, but you can't, it's because it's impassable, it holds a lot of mystery. The same with these mountains, in fact. I think that the foreboding of the mountain, the danger involved, and many have tried. And some of these mountain ranges, for example, in the accounts of Shambhala and stories like that, because they are so impassable, they hold a great deal of mystery and reverence to the people who live in those regions or are familiar with those areas. And it seems as if they are holding or hiding something. People could be existing there. Beings could be existing there unknown to the rest of civilization for, any extended amount of time, carrying on undisturbed at all because of the impossible landscape. So I think it could be a place of many secrets.
Yeah, interesting thing with the and I forget now where it was at exactly, but this is for Derek the Night Stalker. You'll know about this, I'm sure. In the comics, in the X-Men comics, there's this part of the world. I can't remember if it's in the North or the South Pole. It's called the Savage Land, and it's basically um, this artificially made rainforest with full of dinosaurs and all that, and it's on one of the poles, and there are these machines that keep the cold. They basically or manage the weather and keep this part of the world in this state, almost like a prehistoric state. And there's a lot of ties to the comics to that, so it sounds similar to that, and it just makes you wonder. And we've heard about
Yeah.
that similar things for a long time now.
Yeah. There are stories up in the Arctic Circle. I heard about Queen Elizabeth during that time period when they were doing a lot of exploration, that there were letters between Queen Elizabeth and John Dee that up at the Arctic Circle, that there were impossible bodies of water that were coming, sort of the oceans of the earth rushing in and back out, almost like a vortex of sort at the top of the Arctic Circle. And that the force and the power of the oceans rushing into that supposedly a massive hole that was going down into the earth or down into a great cavern made it almost impossible to get back out once you had gotten in.
Mm-hmm.
But once you were in, and these sailors somehow had managed to get in to that region, they did discover that there was somehow like a perfect tropical environment of sorts, and even people, and a massive tower of lodestone, which is magnetic. It's one of the few naturally magnetic stones on the earth. And I don't know, it makes you really wonder about it all, you know,
Yeah,
about those regions
yeah, it does.
for sure.
I'm seeing all the chat here. There's a lot of it. Thank you all for being here. And Apoc says there's fresh water there as well. The ocean went from salt to fresh to salt again, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
In Iceland, you have the classic ice and fire going on because of the volcanic activity. So they have natural hot water springs there too. So you have this sort of melding of the worlds, of the elements in a way. And if you were to go further north and imagine that it did somehow create an atmosphere, or there was an entrance into a yeah, I think it makes sense. I think that there could be a lot more to those regions. There have been a lot of struggle over over the land itself. I know that America, the United States, that North America has put a great deal of, I would say, radar equipment, sonar equipment up in that region, and it's no-fly zone as well.
Hmm.
I think everybody would remember when Trump was like talking about wanting to buy Greenland, and that was kind of awkward. But believing believing that it would eventually become more of a uh, more tropical environment in itself. So due to whatever changes, and there was even talk about Russia possibly setting off nuclear weapons up there to try to melt the ice caps. So there's all kinds of stories that come out of these regions that people aren't really able to go to or explore, unless you're kind of a part of the the gatekeeping system of either being involved in the universities or some other organization.
Yeah, yeah.
So it makes it makes for a lot of speculation.
Huh. Okay. Well, speaking of warmer areas here, this next place in this article that we can cover here is the ominous slabs of black mountains, a mountain in Australia. And so this one says it formed as a result of magma. That's a hard word to say sometimes, I guess. Solidifying over 200 million years ago. And it features hundreds of huge granite-type blocks. And this basically, it's one mountain. It's called Black Mountain. And it overlooks basically part of Queensland, Australia. It says native Aboriginal tribes refer to the mountain as, oh, there we go. There's the word. I'm not going to try to say it. Kalkajaka. That's a lot of A's. Which translates to mountain of death. There we go. Getting back to that whole idea of places being called areas of death or the devil's area. And it's their belief that evil spirits reside within the ruins of this mountain. So apparently it's kind of been crumbling, I guess. These spirits. Oops. Oh, sorry.
Oh
Okay.
no, I think there was something messing up on
Oh,
my
okay.
end, and I was.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm
No
sorry.
problem. That happens. So it says these spirits, legends say, look for humans, basically to devour them, their flesh and their soul. And there's even been sightings of humanoid beings who are described as looking like reptilian creatures. And of course, that's a common thing in UFO sightings. Pilots have also said that there's strange things that happen while they're flying over the area, ranging from lights in the sky to their navigation equipment not working right. And then, besides that, many people have, oh, there you go, simply vanished into thin air there. So that's another thing, the whole vanishing thing. And then, so there's been reports, as I said, of strange lights and UFO activity that these disappearances are caused by alien abductions. So yeah, that's pretty. That's a lot of stuff going on there.
Yes, it is. It kind of broke up on me for a little bit there, but I did read the article earlier, and the accounts of the reptilians living under the mountains, or these different types of beings living inside the mountains, habitating them in some way, come up pretty frequently. We came across it with Mount Shasta, too, where it seems like people are encountering a different species altogether. And once again, it makes sense that they would take habitation in a place that mankind can't comfortably go to or frequent, that it's almost impassable, and that if the areas that, well, in the past, there was an account out of Russia where it was impassable. I think it's called the Dyaltov Pass, and there were hikers that went up into that region, and they were mysteriously attacked. Either way, they passed away in very strange circumstances. And it's as if they had come in contact with some kind of an aggressor or a natural phenomenon, or mankind, possibly government-based of some kind. But in the accounts of seeing these beings that terrify people, it even lends more to the foreboding nature of the mountains that causes speculation for these stories of them being places that are handled very carefully. It's like people only go into a certain region if they have a reason to be there, or if they're trying to accomplish something or do some kind of research. Otherwise, mankind doesn't really go. Like a man won't go to those places because of the terrain. But not only because of the terrain, but here in this case, that there are stories of creatures or spirits that tend to lash out.
Yeah. And this is kind of funny. Not funny. Matt's out in the chat says, "Not my flesh and my soul." Yeah, take one or the other, but not both. That's it's too far. But yeah. And
Right.
APOC says that pass has some 411 events, I think, referring to the Dyatlov Pass, and it does seem like it. Yeah. So, and new to the stream here, or to the chat here tonight, Logan Cullen. Hopefully, I'm saying that name right. Dyatlov Pass is a crazy story for sure, and yes, that is. And it seems like it keeps coming up every once in a while when people come up with new ideas of what happened. So it's still it's still kept in the popular culture, here and there. So yeah, very interesting there. So let's see here.
Yeah.
I'll find the next one here. And I think we've done, okay, we're almost done with this one here. Only two more places here. Okay, now this is interesting. This is the Broadhaven Triangle of the Welsh Mountains. So that would be Wales, I'm guessing, in the UK. Says there are several apparent UFO hotspots in this of Wales. So just the which has regular UFO sightings and have had them for many years. And it's a mountainous area in the southwest of the country, known as the Broadhaven Triangle. And it says that one particular flap of sightings, or series of sightings, happened in 1977, when the coverage of it was, the media coverage, I guess, got to be so much that the Ministry of Defense even checked out the activity in the area. But of course, the investigations were not made public for decades, and they were even kept from the country's political system because of the secrecy involved. And it says perhaps the most famous of these sightings was a school sighting Broadhaven school incident where a lot of children that were in this one school reported seeing a disc-like craft landing in a field near their school. Now that's interesting. And I keep saying that word. Anyway, a humanoid figure came out of the craft for several minutes before going back in, and the craft took off and vanished over the trees, heading for the Welsh mountains. So, and that's really amazing because of the couple other. I mean, I've heard of other stories of these things landing near schools in other countries. So, and I don't remember the names of the schools, but I've heard of this before.
Yeah. There were accounts out of
Mm-hmm.
Africa that there were school children, several instances involving schools, private schools, and then just local rural school systems that where the children did encounter UFOs or what they claimed were. And there were even hysterics that came across many of the students in some of these areas after their encounter, where the school had shut down. There were even for a period of time because the children were having, a reaction to the experience. It makes you wonder. There's a lot of accounts too, when you think about this in general, of the paranormal having an interest in children in general, whether they're interested in human children just as a whole, or in the abduction stories. We have abduction stories out of Mount Shasta. There was in one of the articles you sent me about the robot grandma.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an interesting story too, where the little boy was abducted by a rope, like something that he described as being robotic that looked like his grandmother but had red glowing eyes. And that took him to a cave. I believe it was Mount Shasta. I could be wrong about that. Actually, I don't have my notes. I don't have any notes in front of me or anything. But he was taken to a cave where there were supposedly like guns and cobwebs and things like that. And it's very strange. It does lend into too. I mean, people account to the alien phenomenon, but the paranormal aspects to it too. I mean, if we're trying to understand what they are, the stories parallel right along with so many other stories we've heard that these beings are somehow interdimensional or something that, something relating to not being out in the day to day. But there are also accounts too. There was a mountain system, I think it was up in Alaska, where supposedly there were aliens that looked identical to people, to humans, but that they were somehow exerting some sort of thought control over humanity. And so there's these very strange stories that come out about these beings that are encountered and how they interact with people when they do come in contact. And especially with these children, it seems as if it's very specific that, and a lot of the 411 cases too, not to go into that, but the instances people are having when they are on these mountain ranges, it seems personal to me. I don't think it's random. I imagine that the individuals are chosen or in some way to go through whatever ordeal they go through, that the beings pick them, or maybe it is opportunistic because not many people venture out into some of these regions. So perhaps they take the opportunity when they see it. So I don't know if it's that or if they pick these more rural locations due to the lack of coverage from, exposure in a way, so they can do what they're wanting to do out of the mass public eye. And it's really interesting too what you were saying about the Welsh government in that instance, that they kept it kind of undercover, though through some kind of pressure from the locals in a way, perhaps, were driven to investigate it anyway, but then keep their findings private to perhaps protect the public from something or from causing a reaction of some kind. So it does seem like there's some kind of, once again, with the mountain ranges, it seems like with all these mountains, and I'm glad you decided to cover this topic, because it seems like more and more they are a sort of a gateway and also like a holding station in a way for these entities so that they can mingle in the world without really being in it. And we hear about the same cases of mankind doing the same thing when they go to the mountains. They go for spiritual purposes, they go for, certain achieving something typically spiritually, it seems, because of the going away, the being completely away from civilization. And so I think these beings are drawn to the mountain regions for the same exact reason. I think there's also a tie-in with the weather and the fact that lightning will strike mountains more than it will strike any other land formation. And it seems like the combination of those two things create a perfect environment for paranormal activity as well as interdimensional interactions and appearances of beings from these other worlds, perhaps. So it makes sense
Yeah.
to
Sorry.
me
Yeah.
that they would be a hot spot and that some more than others. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And just the chat here. This. Let's see here. There was one. Matt's all doppelgangers. It's a hard word to say sometimes. Also, Matt's how points out there's fresh air on top of mountains as well. There's the idea of kind of the difference in the air and the energy.
The air
Yeah.
is different. Yeah. At the very high altitudes, there's a decrease in oxygen and an increase in nitric oxide. And people who live in these higher altitudes, for example, like in Tibet or Ethiopia, where we're very familiar with the way that they're interacting with the environment, how they're being physically altered by the environment itself, that they acclimate and adapt to living in those regions. And they have higher instance of nitric oxide, which is also something that shows up in people who have pre-asthmatic symptoms. It allows them it's like they adapt to living on lesser amounts of oxygen, but it increases their capacity to absorb oxygen. And so when they are at lower elevations, they have an increased ability of absorbing oxygen because of the fact that they're having to adapt to the lower oxygen levels of those altitudes. And we've seen that presented I mentioned this to you in one of the other chat rooms, but with the Olympic runners from Ethiopia, they tend to do very well because they have a sort of an edge with their respiratory system due to those high altitudes. There have been talks about that too, going in the Far East about the search for immortality and the mountains being the home to the immortals in the East. Maybe lending something to the decrease in gravity. There's less gravity. There's a change in gravity at these higher altitudes, and there's a change in the air itself. So it's not just that it's pure oxygen untainted by as much pollution, but it also is it's a completely different composition of air being breathed at those locations too, which makes sense for certain other species to be living in those types of areas if they thrive in a location like that. A lot of human beings can't go to those altitudes, literally can't, due to elevation sickness or altitude sickness. So I think that unless they've trained at that level, at that altitude of 4,000, 6,000, I think it's at 8,000 feet, you start to feel the effects of altitude sickness. But some of these mountains we're talking about get up to 20,000 feet elevation. So almost impossible. In fact, some of the people who do try to get to like K2 mountains they're almost completely, it's incapacitating. They're incapacitated, but they struggle on to do it. But it makes sense that it would be a habitation for something else that does just fine at that altitude.
Yeah.
And we hear a lot of accounts of, you hear a lot of accounts of these flying humanoid beings, like we heard about in the West and in the eastern mountains of the United States, that these winged beings living up in the caves in the very high altitudes. So I think there's something to that for sure about the atmosphere itself being different.
Yeah. APOC says the body adapts. The first people supposedly were like plants. They took moisture and sunlight via their skin. That's pretty amazing. Uh, then Matzal says less polluted air. You're more connected for spiritual experiences. And then Matzal, the difference in altitude you can see in sports as well. Yeah, like Um, APOC says the people that lived on the mountaintops basically were like plants. That's there's something to that. Just the difference in so many different factors that it makes sense that people would be different, and who knows how different depending on. I didn't even know that the whole elevation thing. I wasn't aware of 20,000 feet. My gosh, that's up there. Um,
You find it like in the Tibetan regions, you hear about it with well, like the Shambhala, like the people talking about those mountains. Some of those mountains are 20,000, 22,000 feet up, and you have Everest. Same thing. I think it's at 23,000 or something like that. You'd have to look it up, but you're surpassing by far what the average person living closer to sea level can withstand unless they've like adapted themselves to be in that environment. And that's why people who can't just climb Mount Everest, they have to train for it. And sometimes they'll live at 4,000 feet, but train at 8,000 and even, up to 12, 15,000. But it's not, yeah, so it's not just the environment, it's the brutality of the environment and then the inability for people to even go there in some instances makes it a perfect habitat for other creatures that may have no problem with it. And so it makes sense that people might encounter those beings when they are in those locations. And the idea for those beings too of what if you can imagine being one of those creatures, I can't, but to see a human being up there, it must be pretty odd, to be like, what are you doing up here? It'd be like that you're way out of your element, basically.
yeah, yeah.
So it makes sense they'd be interested, you know, or to see a child in the forest in some of these mountains with some of these beings being like, I think I'll take this one because what are you doing up here anyway? There could be something to that. I don't know, but I think that the foreboding nature of the mountains themselves, some of these mountain ranges, that you only go up there if you have a reason to be there, I think is kind of the general consensus. Or if you're trying intentionally to get away for spiritual purposes, to gain some kind of spiritual knowledge. And it would make sense that you might encounter beings if you're doing that anyway.
Yeah, APOC says antennas, referring to the mountains. That's definitely something we're going to cover more in these next couple episodes, these Friday episodes here. This idea of the weather and the 411. So yeah, I this has been a lot of fun to look into this. Let's see here. Logan Cohen says the oxygenation of the air happens strongly the higher the altitude, and the body adapts when the body has adapted, and the said person goes to a lower altitude. Their body still struggles more, but because they are lower altitude at the time, their blood carries the oxygen better because of the previous struggle and the easier altitude. Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and then let's see here. Apoc says, "Oh, sorry." Matal says the Reiki story talks about going to the top of a mountain, and that's I know that word. That's from Reiki healing, Reiki practices. That's a whole
Mm,
thing.
yeah.
Um, yes.
Energy
Okay. There we go.
healing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Uh, then Apoc says it's where ozone comes from, the upper atmosphere. Yes. Yeah. True. So Well, I think that's a good place to stop with this. Again, like I said, we'll be going into other related topics these next couple weeks, and so yeah. Well, thank you again, Jen, for being here. Everyone seemed to really enjoy it. I know I enjoyed it, and this has been yeah,
I did too. Very nice. I'm glad we talked about it, and I had a good time.
yeah, me too. So well, you're welcome to either stay or head out, however you want to do it, and then I'll end the show and we'll go from there.
All right. Well, everybody have a great night or a great day. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank
Thank you,
you.
James.
So, yeah, as I said, on Monday we're going to start a new news show, paranormal news show, starting Mondays, and that will be every Monday, unless a guest needs to show up or be here on the show that on a Monday. That's the only time that will change. Again, so that means on Tuesdays I'll be sharing true paranormal stories, running the entire spectrum of the paranormal on Tuesdays, and then sometimes on Wednesdays as well, except again for when we have guests. As in next Wednesday when Derek, the Night Stalker, is going to be on and to talk about another comic book event. So that should be fun. So on the next Thursday, I'll be reviewing the sequel to The Talisman by Peter Straub and Stephen King. Straub and Stephen King, and which is Black House. I reviewed The Talisman yesterday. So, and then next Friday, we're going to at least try to cover a little bit of the missing 411 stuff. There's so much there from what I've heard. I think it'd be impossible to ever get everything related to that topic into one show, even if we made it a several-hour show. But I'm looking forward to just checking into that and finding really the most unusual sounding cases of it, these disappearances, because I have heard that some people have put out explanations for some cases where there may be more logical explanations, but we won't cover those because that's not as fun. That is interesting. But again, thank you all for being here. Great chat tonight. And I think that'll do it for tonight and this weekend. So until Monday, thank you again for listening to Salcedo Paranormal. Have a good night.